This project I'm going to show you is something we started in 2005 up near Big Lake, Arizona, called the Burro Creek Allotment Project. We were asked by the Forest Service to come up and take a look at some land that was being utilized by elk a lot and cattle, but there was issues with some of the cattle, you know, in some of the areas like these little riparian bottoms. You know, we sat down with the Brown family who had the allotment, looked at a way to have our interests taken care of for elk and have the ranchers still come up with some grazing opportunity and do better stuff for the environment. You know, everybody wanted to do good stuff. When we looked at it, we saw it as quality habitat for elk. On this land at the time, there was probably about 1,000 elk that wintered and summered there all the time. Once the snows came, they migrate down to around Vernon and stuff like that. Game and Fish got on board, came along, and they started looking at antelope. There was some deer there. And then the Apache Trout Recovery Program was a really big issue. This land that we're going to talk about is miles and miles of creeks that are used for the Apache trout. And then the ranchers saw big open areas of pastures that were great for grazing, but also some of these riparian bottoms that were encroached on by trees that were really hard for the cattle to get around and for finding their cattle. And then the cattle obviously walking in the creeks and things like that bothered the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. The Forest Service looked at the same area, you know, saw the conflict, saw the recreational. A lot of this land that we're going to talk about is around Big Lake, Arizona. So the cattle were actually coming into the campgrounds, coming down to the lake while people were trying to fish, things like that. They saw low productive pastures, big pastures with a lot of stuff, a lot of critical habitat, and obviously the dispersed recreational for the people to camp. The goals, you know, we obviously wanted to improve, restore, and protect the National Forest System lands and the habitat. Our issue is the habitat for elk and the recreation. Maintain and strengthen the ranching community by saving areas that were logical for grazing. You know, demonstrate effective cooperation between the permittees, the Forest Service, and groups like ours and other agencies. So it was a big collaborative issue. It went on for about 6 months of tons of meetings with all the different parties. The potential solution that the U.S. Forest Service and cooperators came up with involved getting the surrounding permittees to participate in a restructuring of their allotments and sharing of the Burro Creek allotment. When we started this, we had one allotment. There was one large allotment that was up. Basically, it wasn't for sale, but there was a willing rancher. If he was compensated enough, he would retire this allotment. Inside that allotment, you had these areas that were great for wildlife, but you also had some areas that were great for grazing. And so we went around to all the permittees around the area and said, hey, do you have a piece of land that's better for elk that we could trade you for a high quality pasture over here? You know, made it easy for him to move his cattle. If you know anything about moving pastures, sometimes they have to truck their cattle from pasture to pasture, things like that. They're not all right next to each other. So we came up with all kinds of overlays and maps and tried to make it easier on the ranchers. The reconfiguration proposal that we came up with took 4 different allotments, and actually the Big Lake allotment, since then we've actually bought that allotment also. So once it's, you know, that rancher ran into some issues with some big cienagas out there that the cattle were camping in, and he couldn't get them out of, and so we ended up purchasing that one later on. But these 4 allotments, we traded all kinds of different acreages, all kinds of different pastures, you know, and got a really big bang for our buck. The conflicts, obviously, were the riparian pastures with tree covers, steep terrain, you know, which was great for the wildlife, but just hard on the cattle and hard on finding their cattle. The shorter livestock seasons because of the movements. A lot of fence maintenance. When you have the big pastures, you don't have the fence maintenance that you have in the rocky terrain. Poor livestock distribution. And what the ranchers considered difficult pastures. That's what we wanted because it had a high wildlife value. You know, these are the big open meadows that we tried to leave in the grazing base. You know, high production, you know, low fences. maintenance and things like that, easy to move their cattle from area to area. We soon realized that there was one concept that we all agreed with, and that was smart, logical land management. So smart grazing, you know, basically, and for us, again, the wildlife issues. After 6 months went by, we actually wrote up an MOU with the Forest Service. The ranchers all signed on, the U.S. Forest Service. We ended up retiring 24,000 acres, 17 pastures from livestock grazing just for wildlife. And in not just elk, but you're talking the Apache, trout creeks, all that. There's 40 miles of stream habitat that was removed from the livestock grazing. And every one of those 40 miles was land, it was creeks that Apache trout live in. 28 miles of the threatened Apache trout stream habitat where it's already deemed threatened, where they're trying to grow them and stuff like that. Improved habitat conditions for the wildlife, the elk, the deer, turkey, bears, there's all kinds of, I left the antelope off of there, but a lot of antelope up there. And then the riparian dependent species, a lot of bird species, you know, that were being affected by these cattle. The livestock operations acquired 5 pastures that offset their AUMs, so they had no loss of numbers of cattle on the ground. You know, the livestock recreation complex at Big Lake and the West Fork of the Black River were taken care of through this. We were able to, in the meantime, we've gone up there and removed 70 miles of fence. We've torn out 70 miles of fence in this area. We've also, you know, they've added some fences around Big Lake, you know, so now there's no cattle. There's actually one little sliver coming to Big Lake where the cattle still are coming, but it doesn't affect anything. But basically, it's the end result was a logical resource management that became a reality because of the dedication, obviously, the Arizona Elk Society in funding this project, White Mountain Ranching Community Sportsmen and Women, and cooperative working relationships of the Arizona Cattlemen Association. Before we did this, at the end, we actually went to the Cattlemen's Association and got their approval because we don't want to be deemed as a group that wants to take cattle off the land. We just want smart use of the land with the cattle on it, including wildlife. And so we went to them and sat down with Doc and the guys and said, hey, this is the plan. You know, do you guys have any issue with this? And they signed off on it. And we've done this 3 times now, and we've done this with them every time. But basically, like the red says, you know, there can be a winning solution when there's understanding of the diversity of the uses on our national forests. The beauty of this remarkable piece of land will remain as it is, as it has been for years. It'll be utilized in a manner that is sound and to everyone's benefit, to the public's benefit. That's the key. I added this one at the last minute. In 2009, we did another one up in the earlier speaker was talking about Pivot Rock allotment. Right next to that is the Buck Springs allotment. Buck Springs allotment is 96% of the area there is East Clear Creek watershed. You know, there's tons, 66 miles of perennial streams, tons of riparian canyons, incised canyons. It's a beautiful area, probably one of the most beautiful areas in the state. You know, and the cattle were just really damaging to the riparian area and stuff like that. The Forest Service saw that and put so many restrictions on the rancher there that they could not economically run cattle there anymore. You know, and they were looking for a way out, you know, without having to put in, you know, when we took over that allotment, they were being asked to put in 13 miles of fence. They weren't allowed to have their cattle cross creeks anymore. They had to truck them across creeks, you know, things like that. So we actually, in 2009, I think this is another one that took about 6 months, purchased this allotment and retired this allotment. And what we do is we facilitate, we pay the rancher the value of the permit. We take the permit, we return the permit to the Forest Service with an MOU, with an agreement that this land will be reserved for conservation for wildlife. In that agreement, we also make agreements on what we will come in and do each year. And each year, some people here have been to some of our projects on Burrow Creek and the Buck Springs, but each year we go in there at least once a year with 100 to 100. This last time I had 170 volunteers at Buck Springs, and we repaired riparian head cuts that were damaging. We were restoring sponge meadows by cutting out trees and opening the riparian meadows back up. We're still pulling out miles and miles of fence. you know, all kinds of really good stuff, you know, for the land. And that's what, we don't want to just purchase these and walk away. We want to purchase them and go back in there and help restore this land for everybody's use. But if you ever get a chance to go up to that area around Buck Springs, it's just beautiful. Stephanie's here. I think Stephanie was there one year. Yeah, no, Stephanie came up and we brought up all the conservation groups, you know, from all different walks of life, didn't we, Steph? And, you know, did a lot of really good work up there. But it's a really neat opportunity. It's our way of doing something that's good for the environment, helps with the grazing issue, helps with the wildlife habitat, you know, and especially in the Buck Springs area, it's just filled with threatened and endangered species. You know, there's just a ton of them there. It's one of the top 10 most ecologically sensitive areas in the United States, so it's pretty cool to be able to retire that. And that's my presentation. I'm trying to be fast so you guys get ahead.
We have a few minutes for questions if anybody has questions for Steve.
I'll take yours first.
The MOUs, like on Burrow, is going to expire here shortly, right? The 10-year MOU?
The MOU, yeah, the 10 years, so we'll be sitting back down with them.
What transpires?
It's really, they're, because of the threatened and endangered species and all those issues, they're supposed to be writing it into their management plan that land's supposed to stay retired. Yeah, wait, I know all about it, don't worry.
How much per AUM are you paying for the retired?
We actually, on both, I can't remember the exact figures on both. I think on Burrow Creek we paid $95 an AUM, which was the appraised value. You know, we actually hired an appraiser to appraise the value of the AUMs. There is a dollar figure associated with AUMs. There was one down here. Right.
So you're saying that there's a general agreement that
So that was the agreement. You know, every time, you know, if you deal with district rangers and rangers, they change all the time. And some of them come in and like the new one that just took over Buck Springs was really thrilled with the opportunity to do something with that land positive, and I don't think will be an issue, but there is a little bit of an issue over at Burrow Creek. You know, we're aware of that.
So I would just say to that point, that retirement can actually be done through congressional action, so it will only ever be something protected.
It can be written into the management plan for the area. Right, and it can always change. You know, one of the keys is that it costs $11,000 a mile to put up a barbed wire fence in Arizona. We took out in Burrow Creek alone over 70 miles. You know, so if they do return that back to the grazing base, those fences will have to be replaced. You know. Any other questions?
I have a question for Steve. He was talking about the money that they need to come up with. Can you kind of give an idea how you guys come up with this money or how you raise it?
All the money that we've put into this program is raised at our annual banquets. You know, we've actually raised close to $4 million in 13 years. You know, and all that money's gone to the ground for projects. We fund a whole lot of controlled burns, juniper pinyon thinning, fences. We just replaced all the fences on the big riparian areas around Burrow Creek. We just paid to have all those fences redone to keep the cattle out of the riparian bottoms. You know, we fund surveys and all kinds of other things, but these are the biggest projects we funded. The Burrow Creek project cost $315,000. We funded that out, all money we raised at our banquet. So.
And Steve, what's the easiest or best way to get in contact with the Elk Society or you to get involved in some of these projects?
The best way, if you're interested, go to the website, ArizonaElkSociety.org. There's a sign up over there if you want to sign up to be on our email list, and once you do that, it'll ask if you want to be a volunteer and help out at some of these things. But we do tons of youth camps, and we do 5 or 6 youth camps a year. We do three large work projects in these 3 areas where we've done these allotments. And then we also do projects. We maintain waters and all kinds of other things. So we're always out in the woods doing something. So if you just go to the website, that's the easiest way to find out. Facebook's good too.
Thanks again, Steve.
All right, thank you.